this second session before lunch, I'm not teaching you anything new. I'm getting information from you. And the way I wanted to do that is to use slides that you're already familiar with and to ask you what questions you have and what you need more information about. It's kind of like a review session. So the way I'm using these slides now is just to provide a basis for us to look through things. And part of what I wanted to do was to use something that's already familiar to you so that we're not starting from scratch. Michael is going to go into more detail on these. He has the same slides and he's going to go into detail, but I wanted us to use it as an introduction.
Again, Michael, I'm Bana Tanda de la Tensa to call I attach you to Sumutan Grace. Ngaibana and Tanda de Mutusam Sigins.
Another really important thing about learning is repetition and redundancy. So the more you see something, the better it is.
So
and there's another expression that they tend to use a lot in medical schools, and they say, watch one, do one, teach one.
And
right? So you watched it when you were learning in the 6-year curriculum, and now we're going to do it.
And
the goal is for you to be able to teach it. So some of what I'm also doing is modeling for you how you can use some of the resources that we already have to help you. So I could have put together a lot of new slides, and in fact, when I was coming here, one of my friends said, ask ChatGPT to do it.
Ngade malenga la ya ane ngara ropachki kechete sonsta chat GPT koranga tanda music trigla tene deta zuachi gorwate yongodoga ropachki music trigti peche tanga deta ane dela yan zendala tarichi lamna digurwa like this.
Have you started using chat GPT, or folks, anybody using? Yeah? What do you use it for? You ask questions? Yeah? So my friend Shayla asked ChatGPT to make a slide deck for Introduction to Neuroscience. And it did a really good job, actually. And so if she is trained as an immunologist, so she studied biology and immunology, and so when she created this slide deck, she was wondering if she would have enough information to be able to teach that course.
Immunology. Tiris, that is Tambalaya Moog and Zendela Tatici, the Tatita, Locton, the Tatici Shire, Tatici Tambal Moogi, that Tuatica and Ale, Tangala Yachin Zendra Tiagi, Tatiti Tatachin Dangayunas, and it's in Dangayunas, and Muguatuateleoris.
So what that showed me is that even if you have the slides, if you don't have the background information, it's not very useful.
That Tinado Karsa, Locton, the Tatici Yoba in Bana, Co Jabjung Shisha, Mepamana, Pentoshita Yomaris.
So what I wanted to do was to kind of go through here and then see what you need more depth on. So the way that our 6-year curriculum was organized, we spent some time in the first year talking about the scientific method, how scientists ask questions and that sort of thing.
And then I took a dinner like a Lutriki Chersin and I learned Tampotilla, any Cedric Tablanchi or thing with Cedric by Bana Koga, Tuakan Rochi Tamatante Colaya, Nimutochioris.
And then by the time we got to day 3 of the curriculum, we were ready to start talking about how complex the brain is.
That didn't go to Chicken as soon as you must Tambalaya, Lepasete, Katsuch, Nuzons, how you meeting as and the Shijat Curis.
So this is what we would call neuroanatomy, as we're trying to figure out what are the parts of the brain and what's the structure and the function.
That de la young as once a pony to Passigores, once a pony to Passena, near once a Kuga Canada Tripcha Canada Yemen, Kuga Chaco Canada Yemen, Tilatin, Kuga Jelly Canada Mimiti Cores.
So my goals and expectations for you for this week include your ability to teach a topic.
That and the Duntran Digi ring la Yangarangi Chizusa la Chizuki Tamgi Carison Yosena, Digana Laya, and Chizugi Joshito Pachigala, once a Sanditan Joshito Pachigala Chitkiache.
But I suspect your pedagogy teachers, instructors, gave you more information about how to assess if your students have learned.
Tigalaya, anyone Tandangatsu, Loptripaki Gilatiniukosugi, and it home Tikasani, Jeship Canada, which you met, Talman Kachuchi, or Palingi.
Is that true?
The is.
Yes. So what are some good ways to assess if your students have learned?
That is Jessia, Tablan Yabot and no candidates, Loptriki Karikarishi or Mezutaya. Yeah, formative assessment.
Formative. That includes what? Give me examples of formative assessment.
Quiz. Quiz.
Yes. Discussion. Yes, very good, very good. Okay.
Drawing.
Yes, right. Drawing, that's very important. Tomorrow morning we'll have one of my colleagues is going to join us over Zoom and draw with you. So I'm very excited about that. That should be fun. She's going to be staying up very late in New Jersey to be able to be here.
Okay,
so formative, what other types of assessments are important?
Also the summative as well.
Yes, summative. So tell me about the summative assessments. What examples?
Children tests.
Tests, exams.
Presentations.
Presentations. Experiments. Yeah. Right.
Also debate. Someone saying debate.
Pardon?
Debate.
Debate is a very good one too. We don't use that a lot in my classes because they're not trained, but I use videos a lot. So I have students make videos because people are making a lot of videos recently. We also ask students I ask students to write exam questions. So give me an example of what, or describe to me why I would give an assignment for you to write an exam question.
Ta chisu de la ya deshish jarochidas junsen deshish jarochidas ta ngara in panel hoptula ya jikto ko twa zu chi yorwa khutsu ko jikto tangya ko twa to kusula zu chi yorwa ta ti karchine re te junsen deshish jarochidas to access the understanding.
Yeah, so if you write a really good exam question, you can only do that if you understand the material.
Taranjares keti chorange ani joshi shiraba chi ko la ya ko to yapu chi nye na ro yapu chi haku yo na shine chorange ti ko la tro yapu chi zut kris.
So what I actually do for my sleep class is, because there's so many students in the class and I have to give a multiple choice exam, I have the students write exam questions, multiple choice exam questions.
Danga pila ya ni tan de bigul samsin thya chi gorwa ti na la ya lho thu ma bu ye sang ani te la ya ani ko jikto te la ya damka ma wi tro che damka ma wi tro zu stambal ho thu kusula zu chi yes.
Now writing the exam question is a formative assessment.
Ta kusula ya jikto ge tro zu gi chi ga chi gorwa
But when I put the good questions on the exam and the other students take it, that's summative. So what it does is it gives the students an opportunity to demonstrate that they have expertise in one thing. That's for the formative, and then to show knowledge for the other things in the summative.
That tikar lana lotu kusuge jindengi cheshite zu kapsu kusu titan drevi ge yang ko ge setan nubakari opatya che ane ko jiktu ti tambi kapsu yang kusuge ko toktan kana rochi me te la yang ko cheje gi ores.
So I can grade the exam question that a student designs as a formative assessment. I can grade it and I can show them you could improve this by fixing this, adding this, subtracting this. And so I can work with the question that you design to help you understand more about the concepts. So that's the exam question. But why I'm using these old slides is two reasons. One is because I was late to send my slides to Dawa, so I had to use slides that were already translated. But also, the resource already exists. You can use it and you can work with it because it's already done. So maybe I would change one or two things, but for the most part, the resources that you have, you can use them to start off. So because we're going through these slides this morning, knowing that Michael is actually going to go into detail on them, this part requires you to give me a lot of information. Okay, so our first concept, the brain is the most complex organ in the body. How does this picture help me to express that idea? So describe what we have here, and then tell me if it does help advance the idea or if it does nothing to contribute to it.
Ta par dilati de ta par tigi nga su de sha cha ju ge ta chu chi gorwa ko nyok ta shu ri sa chi gorwa nyok ta shu sa chi gorwa de la ya jap chu chi ge de yang na de dok ro mdos de ya kro chi ge mdos. Yeah. It's
So
support. Yeah.
what is this? What's this first one?
Thangpudi ka re. Mouse.
Mouse. You can read, right? And then, which is great, yeah. And then this one is and this one is Okay. What's the main takeaway point from this? What can you see just looking at these brains?
Dila ta bai bai na kari do sa da dig na ne ko ge par dila ta bai na dig na ne chu chi ton da kari chi teng dos. The size.
Yes. So the scale is different, by the way, right? So there is, if this is a monkey, there's no way the mouse brain is this close in size. So the size is already wrong, right? But it is showing detail.
That other day comes to cook chichon telaya and a tie o mares that they could talk nordeshas roa. Jugi lepati tina chambu yo paina and it's a jola it's a lepan in a chambu croima coyo maris. This tambala cook chatsich or chichon digachigora. The tampukro nordesha simbana tandi dinda teati and a lepa chashi kanzata jubu gun tanchita and chambu shaju reduce.
So the goals and objectives for this whole lesson, because that was just the introductory slide, the goals for this lesson include looking at human brain anatomy.
The Tamputing Utriche, Tanda de la Young Asulhotridiga Medica and Sestalaya, Mig Lepag Punich or Copatelatati,
Ability to compare with other organisms.
Niti Jelayatinu Jelaya, Chingui Shenta Duriati,
And then ultimately get to the structure and the function relationship.
That Hamadelaya, and a cook chakot on jelly, you paru and yes.
Go back. So I'm going back here now, knowing that we are looking at the human brain, comparing to other organisms, and then we'll get to structure and function. Does this help?
That Andangasuga Muisum says on us, Tampote Miguel Lepage. Pungni ti ta chi ti jela ya ti social agenda ta duria che ro ti jela ya ngasu chako ta chele ge dewa sa korwa mugi ti tala ta pa ban remu de ge pheng do es.
Okay. Are there things in this image that you wouldn't know if this was your very first neuroscience class?
The Katie de Tanda Triagi de Ngasuke Cherangita once a sending jump Tantampu Jambi Chilhomson Tamputin out dochi in Bana, Parent de Gani, Netamapuchi Kutuchi Dwes, the Shiari Dwes. No.
No? So, for example, do you know which direction the mouse is facing? Do you know which direction the monkey is facing? Do you know which direction the human is facing based on those brains?
That I give a lepaga partita by Banaco, Zizita, Tudita, Miti, Kashokola, Ted, and you told Shingdes.
I'm going to ask my physicist, yes? Which direction? How do you know? Right. So there's context clues. You can see the spinal cord connecting, right? And so you know if the spinal cord, then you're turned this way, right?
But
remember, as a teacher, you didn't always know that. So you might have a student, when you put this image up, that they don't actually know which direction it's facing. You have assumed, because you have enough background knowledge, to know where it's facing. So as you are teaching, you have to remember that you know something that your students might not know.
that gigantic bichani children carry hakures and a children hakuachi, lotika hamukuachi, usapatia, samlunangi gures.
Something else about this, the colors.
Central carry produce.
Is that the color of a human brain? Is that the color of a monkey brain? Is that the color of a mouse brain? Is it? Yes?
They say no.
It's not the color? How do you know? How do you know?
Pechachana Migile Parwa. Mila Parwa. Migi could Sunta Tansa jury line bed there. To Gonse to Putonacheta. Yeah, he thinks it's a painted for us to have that clear idea of the visual effect. It thinks the brain color for special for human is reddish gray when you open it, not like that.
Very good. Yeah. So this color is a true color once the blood has been drained out.
That they all are chassis to walk chassis in Bana, the cook don't want it is, that don't want it the young Nala Yopig, Chad some of my Dunshan and it could something to do this.
Now, I didn't make these slides, but I am guessing that the reason why this, and this section are colored is to demonstrate that they are the same equivalent area.
The color, Tanda Lepaki Chashi, that Ganga Tizula, Sontrashik Bazuachi or Wada, or Tezu in Bana, this Zuaniti part is Unitinga means, then dinner Zuati, so the Kuranga Chashi and Anetachi, so big Chashi is some of the egg, it's Sontoshipatan in the English.
So I didn't make these slides, but I expect that they arranged them in this way so that anyone who looked at it could compare this to this part to this part.
This Tabalaya, that de la Tanichi in Bana, Kogata, Sontrashipaki Chashi, Sukurwatan, the Lopakitanso, Kusu, and it pension Duriati, Nyongures.
But your students could leave the classroom thinking that brains are blue.
Chichinaro, Charangal Hope Tritin, Zenda Turnuga Jela, Ale Lepata, Ngomboresha, Sam Chitina, Ucholo, Tunsipares.
So as you are building in your instruction, make sure that you check in with your students to see what they take away, because you might have your students leave your interaction with a wrong idea.
This Tambalaya Charan trip pickups, Lotusu, Laya, Nukoto Kandado, Hendomundi, Tashin Tashin Chigures, Roa, the Machipa in Bana, Toptuchins and Datul Rose Tambalaya, Kosolaya, Kutun Lobatinado, Laya, Lay Usipares.
And I might never ask the question, what color are brains? But you can imagine that if you show these slides all the time, that your students might get a picture in their head of brains being blue.
Some see they did, Chorange Musika, they did, and Chigalepa, Son Tokares, the Majapa in Bana. Prendi tension, Yansi, ten by man, Lopula Ale, La Patangombu in Saresag, so the Lesbaris.
So I want to highlight something else about this picture that we're all taking for granted because we know about the brain. What? Oh, go ahead.
Tata de Nana Yanko Pertilata de Degala Yanchi Sechi, instead of Nasugiga, Nasugi Lepacola Shingi, Zankasichi, Yin Shashasigiores.
What at a very basic level might they not understand that we all take for granted about this picture?
Basically, the shape. Ah. Ah. Oh yeah, some are saying like the last one we just consider that's the human brain, and some are saying there's nothing that we obviously think something's guaranteed.
So this is a good demonstration of once you know something, it's hard to remember what it was like before you knew it.
The Karichungore system, but like Katie Churung Shanguchiko, Hakua in Baina, Haku Tanuku Jelaya, Hamaku, Mola Kandachi means Hoashigoroa, the Tata, the Halik Hachankal Kapuyoris. Michikare?
What did he say?
Maybe like if you show this picture, someone may think that the middle one is like a chicken or chick or something like a bird.
Except it has a label.
Yeah. So you label it to avoid that, but yeah.
But here is the assumption that you made based on what you know that your students may not know.
That is tabala choran kare ha that hotrick ha makwa chirwal hotre ha makwa susu ko yan jabjung ko shisha yopala tene dete chiga chopak sia chigorwa ditandene ngores.
It is so basic that we take it for granted.
That team by na de jista tene de by na ngasu in shasha sigores.
Where is this brain? Is it in your foot? Is it in your stomach? Is it here?
Koyores lebate kambala yore dokonona yore koyores.
But your students might not know that.
Chichi by na hotrick ha makwa tene sibaris.
And not just that, but this brain, does this end right here or does it keep going in the body?
Tata lepade tapai bar lepaga dan ju do chi do atang te dola ya cham cheko yore ane zupuna method ru yores.
But your students won't know that.
Chichi banal hotki ha makwa tine ungres.
So these are important things that we sometimes forget because we know it.
That tanda ke pechung khasi chishi so data ngachu ga ha ku yechar wa ta phajla in shasha chachi khusula singre se tina ru yungo res.
So as you're labeling your diagrams, as you're showing these to students, you want to make sure that you don't assume they know the size, the color, the direction. Don't make any assumptions.
That is tabalaya tina ru partam be kapse tampo ne ngachu ge chikta in shasha ga chopote jayo mares. Kashore chichore chanta soba singre sa chigorwa tina samaya yo mares.
And sometimes they might know, but you just remind them.
Chichina kuzushina kores imbana chitsung desi je chitan sutana degrees.
So just on this slide alone, there are already some vocabulary that you could have in your assessments.
That digatal bird digata by bana cherang jela ya cheshuna la pechuton choyage niko dachete da dus.
Okay. So my physicist already knew that they were facing this direction, but do you know the word that we use to describe when you're looking at the brain from that side view?
That de la yang income sendri janji chike ko khashon dola kordes no tongo dus roa. Imbainaya tak khashutsu ko de tinga sun de shone phata ba imbaina khashutsu ko de dusta go yorwa dusta go yopana ngui de la ya karise go yobe ha ku yorwes.
Okay. So do you know what the side view word is? Anybody knows that?
Kalagres de la ngun tan sunitsu attach gorwa. Tan dama khashashe go mar de shola nantan chi gorwa. Some are saying lateral view. Some are saying lateral view.
Lateral?
View.
Yeah, so sometimes people will use the word lateral, but then you also see sagittal because sagittal. It's the sideways, right?
Shongi yor was tanda kashi lateral segre kashi sagittal segre simbana jok with this.
So the next section will show a mid-sagittal section. So it's cut through the middle, again, still facing that direction, but cut through and it's called mid-sagittal.
Tatanda de kuge katatsu koyo bakansila kimani dusta kuge shagchi de tegi tononte tegi yoresta de la yang atsu shin ta iya shanshar doga shanshar shebegi chichasegres.
Okay, so the basic assumption is that this human is facing this direction, And if you went straight through the middle and opened it out, this is what you would see.
That meti katsu ko de ta lepa kimane dus ta bai bana chorong ko ta tuya nguti diranuchila thongres.
But you also call it sagittal as you're viewing from the outside going. So it's the name of that direction, when you look at it, is sagittal, and then you can have mid-sagittal sections as you cut across.
That ando so ko de ta na di bana jogne so ta go yorwa. Jogne so ta go de la jok ke thono de lamna de ko res bana jok ke thono de ta na kimala le de yorwa. Ne jok ke thonang imba ka shila lepa ke kimaten se kicha se go res chi kicha se go res.
So if I was teaching my students in Atlanta, I would spend a lot of time to make sure they had the word memorized for sagittal.
Atlanta la represent the trip up sim bana tanda ke jongi se ro joksa siwa se ro o ti gi tskite kusula ngakso tang chi yes.
But because of the translation issue between us, I don't spend a lot of time on the word.
Taga sula ya chiga dela ya jura chiga orwa jura gi kapala tan de te ani ngarang ge tskiti gala ya ko chusu tangmes.
But when you are teaching, you should.
Inayans chesu ge tipikapsa tskiti ga tele ne ke chambu chusu mabutang gores.
And the reason for that is, as you have conversations, you can use the same language and it makes things easier.
Ta jemala chesu jinse karshila bana jema chesu langmo jibi kapsirwa ani thumung ge kech yezarwa thumung ge kech yezan ani chiko tab duywa chete ani chite yanshe pechton yago yores.
So for instance, if Michael was in his room and we got on the telephone together and I said to him, he and I both have brains, and I say, turn it to the sagittal direction.
Ta picha chapana ke Michael tangara je kiche chapana ko Michael gele na la chi ngara je khapan na kiche chapai bana ngi tanda ge jogni chi goro jog thana ko la ya khapar choro chi is la baina.
And take a picture of the sagittal view and send to me.
Tanda ge ta ko ge jog ke thonang ge par chi jap chi ngala cross chi lavna.
We could do that and I could see exactly what he's talking. He would know what I mean without even seeing it because we use the same words.
That la pala tene de chirgita thong ta phaju sa thoya to thong yo marwa himba na ko thmong ge kech pechu tang yo cha ngarang ge karin de sija pate ko ha ko yo res.
And these become very important as you're communicating in science. You need to talk to other people about what you've done.
That this number the kechambu chago yo res ta char kana ne chon ka kari chi yo kari chi imba ti phala ya kecha shape cups ane dache du pechu ta kechambu chago yo res.
And if you all are speaking the same language, if you understand what they're meaning, then it simplifies everything.
That the cups chechu ga thamog sari ke dera du pa kecha shape cups thamog chkite pechu tang ba yamba na ane thamog chkite pechu tang wala tene de ta phansan la ya ne lamo chia ta chitrir chia te le la u
So these are things that I want you to remember as you're teaching. You want your students to start using the vocabulary. Now, your translators have gone through a lot of trouble, and there have been translation conferences to standardize these terms so that they can be in Tibetan.
That time Badanga Dache Tembeg, it's on the Mampu Judeta to the Chideta, Nakuchisha, Rochin Stambalaya, and the Detalaya, Taku Karsureta, Kali Mampu Chijabchit, and the Dus Tambachisha.
And you can imagine it would have been much simpler to just use the English words.
Chichibana Yanchesu, Degasalaya, in Chitipichutan Shana, Tab Dure, Young Gonsgris.
But there is a Tibetan translation to give you ownership of the language that we use in science.
That tickers and a poina jirba de Yanko Poina Jirsha by Bana Susu Kete Ta Ane Sanji Nantuntil Hag, Kete, that wanted Susula Yorwa, or Tinadu Chike de la Legiores.
So it's important that we learn these so that we're communicating in the same language around these directions and vocabulary in neuroscience.
This tambalaya once a centric and it's the data page on data and the Dacheta, Kashok Tonga, then a page on the Tangasu, Kasugreta, Pansula, Lamochi, but any Hakugores.
So you could have a whole lesson on brain orientation and next slide, please, for me, Michael. Thank you. And the sections of the brain. You could have a whole lesson that you could teach about this. Now remember, my introduction slide, there was a picture of my daughter holding a brain model. Do you remember that? So as you're thinking about how to teach your students about the directions in the brain, what resources could you use to help them remember the ideas more? Describe to me a practice you could do with your class to help them to remember these directions.
We can create the brain head.
Yes.
And see the path and the direction.
Very good. Yes. You could have the brain models that they could also manipulate. Do your science centers have the models that come apart and you can pull off different pieces? You know why this is important? When I put this slide up, I saw many of you doing this with your hands. So the tangible and being able to touch it becomes really important in driving home the ideas. So if you think about what's going to have the most impact on your students, I can tell you about it, I can show you a picture, but if you can actually touch it and manipulate it, it's going to be more impactful. And don't forget about the 3D brain app. Everybody has a cell phone or an iPad or a computer. Everybody has some little device. And there are apps that you can use and rotate in order to see the structure of the brain. And you can empower your students to be independent and play around with these models or these apps to reinforce these ideas. Okay. Yes? Okay. What are my basic assumptions here when I show you this slide? What do I assume you know?
Yeah, gray matter and white matter.
Yes. So another thing you can do is to show this, but this also includes another section. So we talked about sagittal, but this is a different section of the brain. This is a different way to look at the brain.
Taya tim se dikar tampotila nga suke jongi ki thona tente si jasonga remare jongi sne dusta go ro tanda de bana ko lepage kutumbu tamando chikungu kan tangyo res.
Now, because I cannot read Tibetan, I don't know if it has the translation for this right here. Is it on? Is that translated on there anywhere?
No, not translated.
Right. But do you know the word for it in Tibetan?
Coronal.
I see something wrong. I saw somebody do this. This is not right. This way. Yes. Yeah. If I go, it's actually on this one. This one?
Yeah, Jusha.
There are two names for it, and I don't know. Do you have two translations here? Yeah? Yeah. So you want your students to know this, because when you are talking about the brain, a frontal or coronal section is different from a sagittal section. Right? So I don't know how it's translated. Would you know? So coronal. Yeah, so we named it coronal because coronal refers to crown. Yeah. And if you put a crown on your head and slide it down, it would cut in that direction, is the reason why it's called coronal. But I don't know, how does it translated?
The term is center.
Center?
Yeah.
That works too.
A crown center, probably.
Yeah, okay. Yeah, but it's important for you to make sure you are orienting your students and using the right words.
Tanda de capsule, city to Pecheton capsule, Tilaya, and it's city, Tata Karim, Banguche, the Tatachi, you page Goroa. I think it tends to go your rest.
Yeah, we're not going into that philosophical debate. What's this?
Digares.
Is it translated? No? But you know it's a neuron? Why do you know? The structure, right? That's what it looks like. Yes. I have a T-shirt with a neuron design on it my cousin made for me. Oh, is my machine falling apart?
No, it's back.
Okay. Yeah, so the neuron, you know it's a neuron because you've studied neuroscience. The first time a student comes into your class and you show this, what do they think? Looks like a tree. Yeah? With branches, or maybe like a fried egg. Like a fried egg. Yeah? Right? It's got some roots on the fried egg. Weird. But you know what else we're assuming? What size is that neuron compared to those coronal sections?
Benaya Lotu Sawa in the Labana Karichi Conserves, Rua, Nakashi Shindon Sedua, Nakashi in Bana, the gender de Laguda, and then Maguata in the door injuries, Rua, and gender chitadas, Cooking Ramla, you pick a party of the Dana Cookie Chichon Chitoa, she says Taba and a Caradus.
You cannot see a neuron with your naked eye.
That's around me, Jambagi, and once that has Tongomaris.
You can't even see it with a magnifying glass. Also important is, this is a drawing and this is a photograph. If I just put this up here and I say this is a neuron, what even is a neuron?
The Pandit once that has it and once that has a mind agenda that carry.
Okay? And the scale is completely different. So if you just put this up here and we're talking about white matter and gray matter, the white matter is named because it looks white. The gray matter is named because it looks gray.
Tanda de pandisha de choranga chaji tang karji ko kerche shegu yorwa re mare tanda de kasi bana karji de ku do karpu ngongu san karji che chaji de ku do chawla nangu san chaji la gores.
Is a neuron orange?
Ane that tin desija ro da ngasu santra de ne once tazi ku ngasu lithi do karwe salman do karwe.
No. So many basic assumptions, as you are communicating, you can confuse your students if you don't lay down the ground rules.
That's a big ngasugi that timdo sugura, that's a big jisagi ane timdo di tembedo chimachi by imbana ngasugi jisagi that chopochi chigoro, inshasha chigoro, odina mambuchi yorestela.
Why is this here? Why is a neuron on this slide with white matter and gray matter?
Yeah, the brain is made up of neurons.
The brain is made up of neurons. Very important. Very important fact. Yes?
To show the white and gray color because of the part of the neuron that gives the color.
Correct. So the part of the neuron contributes to the color of the overall brain tissue.
Once it has the chashi katola tende tanga lepa yungi ane chontachi gorwata de la karputa chawu yungachi gorwa chontati kutochi gores.
But if you do not know that about neurons, if you don't already know the parts of the neuron, that's not obvious.
Tanda choranga once it has chashi ka netante ha maku e baina tanda choranga deshi jaju nitsiti ha kumarwas.
This is the cell body or soma. And this is the axon. The axon is covered in myelin. Myelin is a fatty layer that looks white.
The
cell body includes a nucleus. I made a joke about the egg, fried egg. But if you think about the nucleus as being maybe like the yolk of the fried egg, then when you put all of those together, they have a darker color appearance than the myelin. So if you think about a bouquet of flowers, say you have like a bouquet of roses, is that a familiar, you have just a bouquet? And all the roses are beautiful and red, and then the stems are beautiful and green. So if you have the bunch of flowers together and you just look at the top, it's going to look red, like the roses. But if you look at it from the side and you see all the stems together, then it looks green. So the white matter and the gray matter are going to be like roses and then the stems. But it's very easy to forget that when you're new to studying neuroscience, that might not be obvious.
Once really tambo wajan by bana and a data shingo maris, from Mashiba yang Sibaris, young Mishiba Sibadis and some actually love on the gender.
Okay, important point. Check your assumptions. Check what you assume your students know.
Neto Ketchambuchika and a Chorangal of Trumune, did the Shingres, a in Shasha Sachigorwa, tell a young and Sitago yours.
What am I assuming you know here?
That data becomes such a Sukari, Shingu Bala and Sopochigores. Part of brain?
Parts of the brain. But what do I assume you know? Tell me all the things about it that I assume. The section, it's a sagittal section. What else? Okay, what is different about this and this?
It's
the same sagittal section, but there is some more context here. This isn't present on the other figure. This includes the skull. Right?
Ne per tampo tembatik na me patikala na digna na ngasu kapese kruwa de lepar wang gurjiti duarpa.
So it might be better to show this first.
Rachiche bana per di tampo tena yapu yusikruas.
So if you think about which direction the brain is facing, right? And you talk about the brain covered by a protective layer, you can also point out where the nose is. There's a lot more information in this figure than the one before. So the very first slide that had the comparison with the 3 different brains did not include the context of the skull. Remember, Michael made the point that your students might not know if it's in the belly or where it is, like where is that organ. This would help with that because you can already see where it is.
Michael was telepathy coyores, Tokonore, Compagana Yores, again, the Tantus, Trachitras was Chichiban, Meshiba, and Sibaris, it was this Tambala, get the per ditam by Bana, Nelepa coy, may say, Koge, Karsokotitan, David, Troat, and Topatis, Helapenguris.
I want to point something out to balance this too. When you're thinking about teaching, you want to think about the context.
But
you also don't want to give too much information and overwhelm your students with too much information. So it's a balancing act to give them good context, but not too much information.
There's something about this image, if we think about it compared to the very first one that I showed, that's good and bad.
Tampo tag partita durbai by the remoon denalaya and a coach Druya Genetang Mandochin Stakolaya, Zanchachian dos, Genchachian dos.
Do you agree with me that it could be good or bad?
Them Yaoyan Reshas, Duayan Reshas, Deleches, Niti Laba Deleches, US.
Yeah? Why? Do you know what I'm talking about? Tell me what I'm thinking about. Try and get in my head and think what I'm thinking.
Uh-huh. Lagela yang sesunda. Yeah, the color itself is the color itself is good to recognize the part, but in reality the color is not there.
Very good. So in reality there is no color like this, but this is a good teaching tool to help you organize the different sections.
This tambala taranjare iswa ngeni selaya chontendra yo mare simbana chontende pechu tangwati tangati ani charang zenda tripi kapsa andira chasindira dinda raise le ko aywa chiach gorwa otege ne ko thapsi sne dugre lakcha pe apuchres.
I'm going to go all the way back. The problem is it's also blue. The cortex is also blue.
Ta delaya kangechi particular system ba digi ngasu relationship dugate ngomburin was.
That's a problem and a good thing at the same time.
Ta deko kangechi re yabu yang chiang res.
It's a good thing because it shows the same structure, the cortex, represented in the same color, so there's a consistency.
That take us ngasu lepa relationship orwate ngombu na tensha dus tadi baina ko lepa relation ti ngombu na metu te ten stambale ko la ya kar tensha segro jint niwa chontra chiki tamba chigorwa ote dus tela.
What is the problem?
Tatela ya kange kare dus. Sometimes we assume that the cortex is blue.
Exactly, and you don't want that. So some of that is fixed. That problem of confusion is fixed here because they show the real picture. What is another assumption, like not the color now, but so the color, it shows you this is what the brain looks like, here's the blood, that's why it looks like that. But what's another assumption that is a little bit of a problem for this image compared to all the other images I've showed you so far?
Khalaya durbaim bana spurgena khachten swati da durbaim bana par delaya yanko kangedu karichdus mandugo it's difficult for them to see which part the parts of the brain.
Right.
Difficult to see the parts of the brain.
Yes, it's impossible to see the internal structure here. But a very simple thing, the direction is different. This one is facing this way. This one is facing this way. You've been studying neuroscience for years, so you know very easily that because the cerebellum is here, you know which direction it's facing. Don't assume your students know that. It's a very simple difference, but you could confuse someone if you don't point out again, oh, this is a sagittal view facing this direction.
joni tayagi thonachi re simbana ka phakordu se de chora hakurwa.
Okay? So I just want to show you, sometimes you make an assumption about what your students know. I just want to challenge that as you are presenting, make sure you're aware of the color, the orientation, and what messages your students might take away that you don't intend for them to get.
Hope to get Chirangi Palaya, Chilanchi, Dalanchi Teni to Gorwa, Daniel Teni Tuati Makio, Genda Tinadota, Guanorju in the Kisibarwa, on this number Latina, no Malabachiguyores.
Sometimes a good way to do this is to take someone who doesn't know anything about the brain and show it to them before you lecture to a big group.
Tachirgi bana dinado which Kanyok the Sag, Talankari or SS Tambalaya, Nicharangi, Mimabu, Chilaya, Zendeti Matriganolaya, and dinado machine me Kachila, that's Chiginino Chila Michilarwa, and they tended the cool and dressy jab Chibana, and a meme among Laya, Chinguno Pachach or Tiga Kangeti set grace.
And ask them questions about it and what they can tell you about it to see what some assumptions are of someone who doesn't know anything about the brain.
Machine made it so like a motorship pickups in Bana, Kosu, Karishingu, Karishingu, Collateral by Bana, and it take a Chingunola, Mampochi, Hakut Gores.
I used to do that with my wife, but now she knows too much about the brain.
Tachirgi Banangaranga Tablet Zada Tonya to Pechetanga, yes, Yimbanata, and the Mugupe Lepa Korlaya, the house and Mapushi Tades.
So now I do it with my sons, and soon they'll know too much about the brain.
That and then Banangaranga Pugam the Chigis in Banaku, Sugulata Lepa Kor Mapushinguris.
Tell me the problem.
Telakanga Yeah. The earlier the cerebellum, the cortex is same color. Now we have different colors.
Right. So this was all blue. Now, right? So if you didn't have any experience with neuroscience and I show you this and I show you this, it's the same colors. They're using the same colors, but they don't match. So what if I thought this was this? It's not the same thing. This is a lobe. This is cerebellum. It's the same color, right? Now, because you know already the structure of the brain, it's not a big problem. But think about what you have to tell your students so that they don't leave your class thinking that this is this.
Tamponange ngasuge lenin tendega nadab ni chege chonda chibare nowa to choronda onsa sere jang cha haku yore simbana thoptukiti haku marwa testabalaya tigi notriti mazu alaya ani zabra chigures.
I don't read Tibetan. What's this?
Jende garesa. Sabude gareta? No. Chibarwes.
Where is it? Right?
Yeah.
Very easy for you to do because you've been studying neuroscience. Very dangerous if you're new and you start to make these connections.
Once it's generally tampo pachimba then you can chambu shures touch don't do tayona.
Yes?
It is.
Okay. Okay. Any problems here?
The color?
Color again. Right? So, first thing you're going to explain to your students is, don't worry about the color.
That tambut the soda de la Kange duas, this Tambala Churangolopri Kare, Tambuti Kare Deshagor says Tambalaya, Central Kolaya, Samishita Matans.
Okay? Valuable information about the orientation of the brain here.
That the Jerica Tabalaya, Lepagi, Kukasho Tendantires.
Which direction is that? If that was in the head of a person, which direction would that person be facing? Show me. Stand up and show me which direction is this person facing. This way. Yeah. So there's a scientist or a doctor holding the brain. Why is that important? Tell me a little bit about why this picture is very important compared to every other picture we've seen so far.
Yeah, the size of the brain.
You can get the scale. Yeah, so you can understand how big or how heavy the human brain is. But you can also get ideas about the real color, right? So here, the difference, what's the difference between this one and this one? What's different?
Yeah, one thing is about the presence of blood.
Yes. So the blood is still present in the first picture, so it has a different color. This one, the blood vessels have already been drained, and this is probably most likely a fixed brain, so it's not soft, it has a different texture. That's not how it would be in the head. The other one is much more like what it would be in the head. That's what we're going, yeah. So now this one, which direction is this? The brain, not the scientist. Which direction is the brain facing? You're my model, come. Come and act it out. Which direction is the brain facing? Perfect. Yes. How about this one? Do you have any clues about which direction this looks? Do you have any clues about which direction it's facing? Show me, show me. Come. Show me where you are now. Why? How do you know that? Very good. So, the occipital lobe back here. Thank you. The occipital lobe is down here, which means this is the back, which means they're facing this way. This is obvious to me. To me, I don't even have to be able to read the Tibetan to know this brain is facing that direction, and this I don't even need to read it because I have spent so much time looking at brains that I am able to very quickly figure out which direction. But you can imagine your students who are new would see this little opening right here and think that it's this.
Roya, Chanagil look to Sawatina Doshile Bambana, the Josala Pig, Subkachidua, de la Yopigo, Subkati, Ingres, and Yamsabaris.
So something you can do would be to reorient this, right, so that they match, or be very explicit when you're talking to your students and just remind them, just like I had you get up and say, this way or this way. You can practice to be able to make sure that they don't get it confused.
Kaseu Goneko, the Sessiati or Estandela Yanko Gelaya down the town, Kakoyo Metangiswa. And Shandachika system, but Tampu Pardinashavi Kapsugia, Burger Kasho Shoshila, Tayachura, and Shoshila Tango Bagge, at the Nachayoris.
Yes? Any questions?
There is, draw ears.
What do you think? Yeah? You want to say?
Canadus.
Karasana, Kadab, the two dubs in the Duskivashi, the Tandadin of Sukachi again. Chijunji short the Gana Maya, this Jardikiros. Digi Kabalatene, the gap the Dinhago to in condition Hagotin. Then the Gengi and Lamsa Hago to the Sunzo.
His question is, you said, just even look at the picture, you can distinguish which direction the brain is facing. So,
What's going on? I went to sleep?
Might have run out of power.
Oh, did it die? I don't need the
he's
clicker.
asking, how can you do that? How can
I do it?
Yeah, how can you distinguish that? Because the gap or that fissure, that the gap is...
I've been studying neuroscience for like 30 years, right? So, but the gap, it's important, and you will learn more about this. So once is it going to come back up? I have to log back in? Yeah. So my battery died. But you know what I'm going to do? Because I don't mind the punches. Can you see a little bit? Yeah, you can connect it. Yeah. Yeah.
Oh, actually, if you log in, your computer's good now.
Oh, it's ready? Okay. Sorry. Are we back? Amazing. Sorry about that. Right. Okay. So how do I know? The little cleft here in the front is much smaller than the one in the back.
Okay, that gela is one as well. Can have creation and so subcani door and don't jabber sukadua. Then the locate gelocote druba and bana, the locate choice.
Right? Yeah. Because the cerebellum has to fit under here.
Chica system as cerebellum system, but there was leaning. Leaning theta jalotele coshongo or what take it.
So the brain models would help you to see that, because each half, right, comes together and they're almost identical, each half, and when they come together they have to fit the cerebellum in between.
That teaches you lepag pizio tabai manatongres, pizitela ta halam chipachishan race in Sharwa. And it didn't Shakuran Yamton Jedetan Kimato Alayanga Suge, Lenin Tishungu or wa, Tishungu is.
So if you have the brain models that your students can manipulate and hold, they'll get used to that idea very quickly.
That Kete Charalaya lepage piziti, and you'll tukungo pizitiama, dosiama, Tritana Chita by Mina, and it under Digi Kurung dosage or wa, the Lamson Congress.
So what you probably don't have access to are actual human brains like this.
That Chichibaina Chisulaya, Nigel, Miguel Lepage, Lepachi or wa,
And that's fine. But we have, at Emory, for instance, we have a library that includes these brains, and we can check them out and bring them into our classes and show students, and then but I've been doing that for years.
Emory
so you get used to doing these things, and it just becomes like natural to you. In tea time, I was talking to this science teacher. I didn't get your name. Yeah. So we were talking about brain tissue slides, right? So when I was in graduate school, I did work with rats and mice, and I had to cut the thin sections and put them onto not PowerPoint slides, but microscope slides.
Person the Tizi Shiwas Goro, Tizi Shiwage, Lepati Kenchi, the Taton Chishe Ola Tagi, Ani Karsa, Ninshostoa, these opinions.
And so I would sit and cut each rat or mouse brain into very thin slices and collect it into one well.
The Karsa, Tizigi Lepachigora, Putata, those chicken asagi.
And then my next job was to put them on the slides in the right order.
That is Jelaya Tambuko, Tapatagurua, the no Jelaya Kusupana Kari, Patinansing, and Eco Shetach to Assistant, the Gatada Jaguares.
And it was like putting a puzzle back together.
That thing I saw go Chagdus.
And I'd have these brain sections swimming around in a bowl, and I'd have to pick out which one came next.
That did not do which the Kasach, a new chicken on a lepaga chashituzu, dus de deores, Tangai Banako, Kurum Tata Tata Koshe, Ganjaguores.
And if you have done that a few times, you get pretty good at figuring out what goes what's in front, what's behind. You figure out the orientation very quickly.
That's wrong. Tamakashila Cheba and Bana, Lepagachi, Kashotan Tachigoro, and then Gangire, Gangijila Gangadugori Seti, Lamsan Shion Grace.
So I remind you that doing always reinforces the concept more than just looking.
This Tambala did Karidesija was Sananga to make it Tomwa Tele or the Cheba in Baina, Karichi Shingu Pate, and Chitan Tangores.
And I'll remind you that the more you do and the more this becomes automatic, the easier it is to forget what it was like before you knew.
That day, Yansi Cheba in Bana, that Peta Susugita Karsugurita, Ranginda which has Guru, Jilaya to Comion Stambalaya, the Comion Guru, Jilla Comion becomes a letete Mashigona, Kandaduchina, Sayati, Hashan Kabuchagres.
Now, when Michael starts to teach about structure and function and neuroanatomy, he'll go into more detail about this. I wanted to just show you that here separated the hemispheres.
That and again, Michael get the quarter jutigres, that and again, de la chitanching water chickens, that the capsanga sugar, lepaga dumchin, kachi shayorwa, katesha jugu perchitan.
And they have also left intact the eyes.
They said under the Kasuko, Kachisha or the Imbana, Miki, that's such your mixadi, Tarajashashadus.
So that's another cue for the orientation of the brain, because of course, with the eyes in place, you know the head is this way.
The mig you patelated data, Lepandi Kashokare, thank you, Mete, Shialila, yours, Migupa, Teleteta, Lepadi, do stamp, Kashotara, thank you, Nanga to talk Grace.
Okay, all right. So, one more, Kelden, thank you. So this, I'm not going to go into detail, but as you can see, why do they have this image as well as this image? What's the difference between these?
That under the Casa per Nidwarwa. Perjin the Nichanyam the Shagoyage Jinsenkares, the part Sujo Partana Pajote Parla, Keper Caridus. Yeah, one is the brain as a whole, and one has the hemispheres apart.
Right, so it's separated hemisphere, but this image is a drawing, and this image is a photograph. Right? So you use a combination of the two. So the drawings are important if you want to demonstrate something, but if you show the real picture, then your students get a better idea of what it looks like in real life. Okay. Now I don't have my slides and I would click around, we only have a few minutes, but going all the way back, Calvin, to this one, no, that, actually, go, that one. How is this different from the other one? Important differences between this one and that one.
Yeah, this one is a whole, the other, this one is two hemisphere. Also over here we can see some of the different parts of the brain.
Yes, so you can start to see the internal parts versus the external parts. So you can compare this to the color one with the blue and the different parts. But how about this one compared to the one with the hands? Talk to me about the blood in this one, the next one, and this one. Anything? So in one, there's the fresh red-looking blood, and in this one, right, so you could see the fresh red blood here, but the other one, it's darker. Do you see that?
Yeah.
And in the other one that they're holding, it has none of that color at all. Be prepared for your students to be curious about that if you're showing different images. So one is fresh tissue, one is fixed, one had the blood removed, and be prepared to explain why they look different. Okay. Okay.
And in case you're interested, that black may be dried blood.
It is. So when you get a cut and it bleeds and then you get a scar, it's the darker. So it's the same thing, it just clots inside the blood vessels. We're going to wrap up so you can get to lunch, but Michael has an assignment for you. So he wants to tell you that before you go to lunch. Any questions that you have from this session, I'm willing to take at the beginning of our afternoon session. So when you come back, if you still have questions from this, I'll address them then, but I want you to get your instructions for our afternoon session before you go to lunch.
ane gela la nyangkong jab ki je go tan rewi ge ane ngutu je kha chi yes ro tanda jinda de to tan rewi ge tro yo pa na nyangkong jab la tan degrees
tuk je che.
So here is your assignment.
aha ta de nyangkong jab ki je go de yes.
We introduced ourselves to you at the beginning of class, but we don't know who you are.
nga su ge nga su ngone che chula du ngo te chi shayos nga su si ma de emba na nga chu che su si ha ku me stando.
So at the start of the afternoon session, we'll have each of you introduce yourself.
aha ta nyangkong jab ge chotan kap se che me re re ngone su su ngo te chi gu yes.
We want you to come up here and tell us about yourself as if we were your students.
aha ane che su mi re re shin dan da lo yong de ta ane nga su che su lo tri ba shi sha de ta che su ngo te chi gu yo res.
You want to make yourself relatable?
aha ta ta bu de su su yang pha chu la ya chi ta kan de wat gu yo res ta.
So share something personal about yourself so they feel like you've given them an opening to come and talk to you.
aha ta su su ge ta mi ge tang ro yo chi ni chi ngo to chi gu yo res ta chi pa ba na ta nga su lu thang yu yo ta cha la ke cha shen ji tu ga chi ro wa o tin da gu chi chi gu yo res.
And tell us anything you'd like to tell us in that introduction, but only 30 seconds.
aha ta ngo to ge tin tin na ta le chi su ge su su ko ka ri shen ji tu na shen na de ge res im ba na chi sa kar cha sim chi ma shi mes.
And what we'll do is probably just go around the room, and so you'll come up and you'll sit down, and the person next to you will come up and sit down, and we'll do that for the whole room.
aha ta da panim chin do yes ro chi on de se ja gro an ma de tu nga sun za da ka za do yes.
Enjoy your lunch. See you in the afternoon.
oh ya ni ko je le ja yos.